to research, and Allan's going to be talking to us about the new cancer moonshot and why now is the right time for us to be cheerful. So Allan, without further ado.
Thank you very much. I assume the microphone's on and you can hear me okay. Everybody, welcome. I had to come back to Manchester from Arizona. I missed the rain, so it's great to see you. So come back with me 6 decades. It's 1952. It's an unseasonably warm February lunchtime, and 2 men, one American and one Brit, are going to the pub. It's a pub that was formerly the haunt of World War II Spitfire pilots, and it's now frequented by students and university lecturers. So they come in from that crisp, clear winter air into a fog of stale beer and pipe smoke. They push through the crowds, they rush over to their colleagues, they disturb their lunch and announce they've discovered the secret of life. That single statement absolutely revolutionises our whole understanding of biology and of medicine. Almost exactly 10 years later, one man stands alone at a podium on a hot, airless, sweltering Texas afternoon in a big football stadium and announces his intention to send a man to the moon. Why am I telling you these two seemingly completely unrelated stories? It's because those two events together conspired to a third event, and a third event that is critical to what we're going to talk about tonight. That sense of optimism in science, that sense that science and technology could change the world's problems, could revolutionise medicine and treatment of diseases, an optimism that science could solve any problem, no matter how complicated, how difficult, in 1970 led Richard Nixon to sign into American law the National Cancer Act, the moonshot of cancer. So fast forward to the present day, 50 years on from that moonshot. And to the general public at large, that moonshot has really failed to deliver pretty much anything. Yes, survival rates are better than they ever were. But it might surprise you to learn that the actual death rates from cancer have only decreased by 5% in 50 years. So given that, given what appears to be complete failure, why, in February of this year, did Barack Obama stand up in Congress and charge Joe Biden, his vice president, with a new cancer moonshot? Why did he say that America will help beat cancer and eradicate it from the globe over the next 10 years? What gave him the confidence to make that declaration, to declare that new cancer moonshot? So I'm Allan Jordan. I'm the head of chemistry in the Manchester Institute across the road, and what I want to explore with you tonight for about 15 minutes is 3 things. 3 things that I think help us understand why those previous efforts against cancer have failed, and why I passionately believe, thanks partly to some of the research you're going to hear about tonight, that now is the time that our moonshots against cancer just might work. Why the technology and the understanding we have might just allow us to make those breakthroughs, to help patients in the Christie Hospital. We see 40,000 patients every year in the Christie Hospital, and only 20,000 of them will beat their disease. But I believe now is the time that we can do something special for the other 20,000. And I'm going to explore that with 3 things. I'm actually going to explore it with 3 quotations. And the first quotation isn't a quotation, it's a question. And it's a question we get from our fundraisers. We do a lot of work with fundraisers coming into the Institute, and many of them ask the same question, and it's the question that inspired the talk tonight. And that question is simply this: if we can land a man on the moon, why can't we beat cancer? So think of the moon program. One of my personal heroes is a guy called John Houbolt. John Houbolt was an engineer and a mathematician for NASA. And when Kennedy stood on that podium in Texas and said, "We choose to go to the moon," it was John Houbolt who, against all common preconception, actually worked out how to do it. Because he worked out you could take this huge, immense problem and break it down into smaller problems of maths and science and engineering. And on the back of that, you could put that big problem back together and work out how to solve it. And his solution to the problem was the Saturn V moon rocket. 3 million individual components as tall as Blackburn Tower, thousands of engineers, 18 months to build. It's the single most complicated device ever built by man. But we know of something that is much, much, much more complicated than that. It takes 2 people to make, and it takes 9 months. And if you were right, it's the human body. The human body is comprised not of 3 million components, but of 37 trillion individual building blocks, 37 trillion cells. Inside each of those cells is 10 million individual components. So each cell is 3 times more complicated than the rocket that took man to the moon and brought them back. Each of those 10 million components have thousands of intercellular interactions that make those cells work. We were sitting in the lab and we did a quick back of the envelope calculation. And we believe that the human body is, are you ready for this? 125 billion times more complicated than the rocket that took man to the moon and brought him back. So we did the moon program in 10 years. Give us 12.5 billion years, we'll beat cancer. We aim to do it a lot faster than that. But the human body is exquisitely complicated. And that leads us to the second quote. It's by Albert Einstein, who very sagely said, "The more I learn, the less I seem to know." And I think that's exactly what we find with cancer. When Watson and Crick said, "We've understood the secret of life," what they meant was they've understood how genetics works, how hereditary information is passed from mother and father to child, how the structure of DNA supports life passing through the generations. But they massively underestimated the complexity of that information. We say the human genome is 3 billion letters long, and I have Crispin to thank for correcting me on this, because it's one strand is 3 billion letters long, but there are 2 strands, and those 2 strands are duplicated in every cell. 12 billion digits of information inside every cell of your body. That's about 60 volumes of the Yellow Pages inside every single one of those 37 trillion cells. We know that every cell in your body picks up 10,000 mistakes in that information every single day. And any one of those mistakes could lead to cancer. So perhaps the question is not, why do people get cancer? Why do 1 in 2 people die from cancer? Why do we not get cancer all the time? Why are we not riddled with cancer? And the answer is, as we're starting to understand, the body is exquisitely good at copying and repairing that genetic information. Even though it's 50, 60 years since we understood the structure of DNA, we still don't understand exactly how the body copies those 12 billion digits of information so well. And we don't understand particularly well when mistakes happen, how the body mends those mistakes. But we know that the body is incredibly good at fixing those mistakes. And if we could understand better where the mistakes slip through and fix those, then perhaps we could stop cancer being as aggressive as it is. Maybe we could fix those rogue cells. So we're starting now to get a handle on that complexity that's present within every single cell. We're starting now to have the technology to read those 12 billion bits of information. We call it genetic sequencing, reading the instruction book of life inside every cell inside your body. And that started to throw up some interesting findings. So take, for example, a case of a guy who had pancreatic cancer. It's actually out in Boston. And he had to have his pancreas removed. And he donated his pancreas to medical science, which isn't a particularly normal donation, but there we go. They took his pancreas and they divided it into 17 different sections. And they did the genetic sequencing of each of those 17 sections. So they read the instructions of the tumour from 17 different parts. Every single section was genetically unique. So this patient didn't have cancer. This patient didn't have pancreatic cancer. This patient had at least 17 completely unique individual types of cancer that were unique just to him within that single site. How do we deal with that complexity? How on earth do you deal with that level of complexity within a body in a way you can actually treat the patient? We are starting to understand how to deal with that. We're starting to understand how, in labs like my own, we start to develop the treatments that will allow us to tackle that complexity and deliver groundbreaking new treatments to really change the lives of patients with cancer. That brings us to our third quotation, which I like to describe as the Winston Churchill paradigm. This research takes time. We are not at the end. We're not at the beginning of the end, but we probably are at the end of the beginning. We are learning now how to take the knowledge we've amassed over the past 50 years and actually start to make a real difference to the lives of patients. We've learned how to deal with heterogeneity, and it's not through biology, it's through maths and computation. By reading the sequences of that heterogeneous tumour, all those different tumours together, we can mathematically model what happens with drug treatment. And what that's shown us is that in any patient with cancer, where their cancer is detectable by any traditional means, be it an MRI scan or a CT scan or just a lump they can feel, if we treat that patient with a single drug designed to exploit a weakness within that tumour, 3,000 to 5,000 cells will be left behind. They will be completely drug resistant. And those cells will grow back to form a new tumour, which is drug resistance. It's not bad luck, it's not awkward biology, it's maths and statistics. But that maths and statistics tells us that if we use a second agent that is unrelated and works in a different way to the first agent, the chances of those 3,000 to 5,000 cells being resistant to that second drug are virtually zero. So with the right combination of drugs, the right treatment, the right patient, the right time, we should be able to use kinder, better, more effective treatments to give patients long-term benefit and help them beat their disease. And that's the challenge for labs like mine, to deliver those groundbreaking treatments. But it's not just about delivering the treatments. To allow us to deliver those treatments, we need to be better at understanding which treatments the patients will respond to. We need to be better about how we diagnose patients. Because taking a sample of the tumour to read that genetic code is an invasive procedure and it carries risk. We want to get better at how we diagnose patients. Work going on in this building and across the road is doing exactly that. We know bits of cancer will break off around the body and will move around the bloodstream. And previously that's just been an accepted fact. But we can now isolate those circulating tumour cells from the blood. In a 10 ml blood sample, there may be 1 or 2 or 3 of those cells. But we now have the technology to isolate them and from a single cell read the genetic code, understand the vulnerabilities within that individual tumour cell, and design a treatment strategy just for that patient. That throws up complexities of its own. A lot of the vulnerabilities we find are maybe only present in 1 or 2 or 3% of cancer patients. So imagine you're a cancer patient and you enter into a clinical trial and they're looking for one of these 2% vulnerabilities. So only 2 in 100 patients will carry this vulnerability and be eligible for the clinical trial. So you enter into the clinical trial, you have an invasive sample of your tumour taken, let's say it's a lung cancer sample. You have a big needle stuck in your lung, it takes out a piece of tissue and it's genetically sequenced. And you're not one of the 2. You're one of the 98 who don't carry that vulnerability. But don't worry, there's another clinical trial. So can we have another sample and read that sequence again and find out, actually, no, you're not one of the 2 that's eligible for that trial. To find those 2 patients, for every patient you find, you have to screen 50 people. That costs £2 million a time. It's unsustainable. But think of it from the patient. This is a patient who has failed chemotherapy. They're running out of time. They're trying to get onto a clinical trial. That cycle of hope, despair, hope, despair, hope, despair, and all the time the clock is ticking. Our chief clinician said we have to change this. We have to stop finding patients for trials and start finding trials for patients. That's exactly what we're doing with genetically organised clinical trials, what we call basket trials. Focus 4 for colorectal cancer, Matrix for lung cancer. A patient comes into the clinical trial, they have 1 sample of their tumour. It's sequenced, not looking for 1 Achilles heel in the cancer, but maybe looking for 10, 20, 30, 40 different weaknesses. And on the back of finding that one weakness that is unique to that patient, designing a treatment strategy, testing maybe 14 or 15 different medicines or combinations of medicines in parallel within the same clinical trial. So rather than 2% of patients being eligible for that trial, perhaps 40, 50, 60% of patients are eligible for that trial. It's certainly better for the NHS because it's cost effective, and it's a hell of a lot better for the patients that are going into those trials because they're actually getting access to the groundbreaking medicines that we're delivering into clinical trials. Now bring those two arms together, the blood-borne biomarker, the blood-borne circulating tumour cells, and the better clinical trials. We don't know yet whether those blood samples are truly accurate and allow us to make a meaningful clinical diagnosis. At the moment, all diagnoses are made on that invasive tumour sample. But we have a clinical trial running right now in Manchester called Target. And that Target trial is designed to ask that specific question. Can we accurately diagnose a patient based on a blood sample, not on a tumour sample? So at the moment, we're trying to validate the technology. We're taking two samples from patients, a tumour sample and a blood sample, and we're comparing the results. Because we don't want to misdiagnose patients. We don't want to miss diagnoses. We have to be sure this is predictive, it's accurate, and it's reliable. If that delivers, you can see a complete change in the way we treat patients with a blood sample. That then raises the possibility that maybe we don't need a tumour sample, and if we can have a blood sample which is non-invasive and we can do it cheaply, maybe we can use it to deliver early diagnosis. Perhaps detecting tumours in patients before they even know they're ill, before the tumour is drug resistant, when they will still respond to that single, targeted, well-tolerated, effective treatment to really help them beat their disease. That's what we're trying to do here in Manchester. That's the work that is going on right now within these buildings. On the back of all that, I really do believe we are on the cusp of a golden age of cancer research. An era where all the technologies together, all the learning we've amassed over the past 50 or 60 years is just starting to come together and gel together to allow us to exploit the best technology available, which you'll hear more about in the next two talks, to really make a difference to the lives of those 20,000 patients in the hospital who currently don't beat their disease. We're starting to get to grips with the complexity that's buried deep within every rogue cell, in every tumour, in every patient, and use that information to truly make accurate diagnoses and make sure we give the right drug combinations to the right patients at the right time to actually deliver real clinical benefit. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be like the tabloid press. I'm afraid it's not going to be groundbreaking discovery today, cure for cancer tomorrow. This is going to be a long process. We've already had 60 years of learning, and we will not deliver this golden age tomorrow, next month, next year. We may be talking a decade before we see true benefit from all this. But I think we are starting to really understand this dreadful, dastardly, belligerent disease that grows inside so many patients. And perhaps, just perhaps, given all that, after multiple different abortive attempts, maybe now is the time when our cancer moonshot finally gets off the ground. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your